if you're going commuting, let's say 40 or 50 kilometers a day, which is a very high commute, but if you're commuting that kind of distance, if you've got an IC engine vehicle, you're looking at about 1 liter of fuel every day. That means about 90 rupees per day. And that vehicle is probably costing you about 75,000 rupees. In our case, the vehicle is costing you about 62,000 rupees. So initial purchase price is lower. Speed is also lower. I accept that. But when you look at it, if you're running that 40 to 50 kilometers a day, you're looking at 1.5 units of power. That's about 12 rupees. Huge difference. So when you look at it over 3 years, if you're using every day, 1,000 days, you've got 90,000 and you've got 12,000. Your 78,000 is the saving that you have. And so this vehicle actually becomes more than free. You've actually taken money into your pocket rather than spent it. So if the dealer makes money, we will ourselves make money. We cannot make money sitting on the shoulders of the dealers because that's a network, that's a strength that we've got. See, companies are not built on the shoulders of one person or this thing. It's built on the shoulders of a team which believes what you're doing.
Hello everyone, Ashok here. Thank you for tuning in to this 24th episode of Indian Startup Stories, a podcast thriving to bring out experiences and insights from entrepreneurs across India. Today, our guest is Naveen Munjal, MD of Hero Electric Vehicles Private Limited, a brand and a company which is pioneer and market leader in the Indian electric two-wheeler industry with more than 500 distributors and playing a critical role in R&D for battery and technology behind two-wheeler EV space. In this episode, Naveen shares his background, rich experience in two-wheeler industry, importance and opportunities in two-wheeler EVs in India and in global space, the reason and importance of Hero Electric being spun as a separate entity from the group, the role that the company has played as a market leader, the battery research and technology R&D behind the milestones, recalling initial days during drawing board and business plan, importance of collaboration with dealerships and online-offline sales, and much more exciting and valuable information for you to take away. So without further ado, let's jump in. Hi Naveen, it's wonderful having you on this show. Thank you for coming on Indian Startup Stories today. Welcome.
Thank you, Shok. It's a pleasure being here today. Thank you.
My pleasure too. Naveen, you are managing a very big company now, Hero Electric Vehicle Private Limited. How were your early days? Let's start with some of your background, which we don't know. Would like to hear on your early days.
So Ashok, so I belong to a town called Ludhiana, which is in Punjab, north of India. And so all my schooling life was spent in a boarding school. So I was in one of the oldest co-ed boarding schools in the world, which is called Lawrence School, Sonar. And so I went there when I was 9 years old, and I was there through my schooling years. Post that, I came back to Ludhiana, went to college in Ludhiana because my parents said enough is enough. You've been out for 8 years. Now time for you to settle down here for a bit. And then after that, went off for my MBA to UK. Once I finished my MBA, then my intention was to start working there and start getting an internship there. So I was lucky I got an internship at Land Rover at that point of time, which was owned by BMW during that time. I was there for a while and I was thoroughly enjoying my time there because I was loving this whole experience of working in a company like Land Rover, which was a fabulous, fabulous company. And I was working in the marketing department. So at that point, I was partly responsible for the Birmingham Motor Show, which is the largest UK motor show that happens. And this was in September of 94. So immediately after that, that was over. I was looking at a more meaningful role there in the company. But my parents started putting pressure, so as to come back to India, that I've been out for too long, etc. And I came back to India, went back to Ludhiana, started working in the bicycle company, Hero Cycles, at that point of time. But very quickly, I realized that, coming in as a third generation person in this company, which is a very well-run machinery, very well-run company, there's little role that you have to play. There's little change that you can bring about. And I was looking at, what is the kind of a change that can I bring about? How can I really make improvements kind of a thing? Or how can we diversify for that matter? So I came in, was there for a while, but started looking at diversification as being an important part of our whole factor. Post that, and then in 98 got married, and that's the year when we went off to the US, basically to explore what is going to be our strategy going forward, business strategy for the group. Now, we were too dependent, the whole group, Hero
Mhm.
Group at that point of time, was we were very focused on the automotive sector. And so we were always looking at what is the mitigation of risk? What is it if there's a recession and the automotive sector gets hit? What happens to so many companies which are dependent on this group, this sector? And so we went off to the US to explore what should be our diversification strategy. Came back from there. We were there for 4 months, 4 5 months, and just working on different options, etc. Came back and we set up the first call center BPO at that point of time. And even though I had come in
Mhm.
from a completely commerce background, all my school education was in commerce, but I could think technology. I mean, I used to be very, very fond of technology. So I took on the role of actually the CTO in the call center, helping set up. We had technical teams, of course, but I was working with them in setting up the whole call center. And that's the time when I also realized that uh, there was a wide gap between the transportation segment. So you had the bicycles at about 1,500 rupees or 1,200 rupees at that point of time, and then you had the motorcycles and scooters at about 44,000 rupees at that point of time. The moped category in between was kind of shrinking. So I was trying to understand what is the consumer journey. How is he going to jump from a cycle to a motorcycle or a scooter? The gap is too
Mhm.
wide. So can we bridge
Yeah.
the gap somehow? So that year in 2000, 2001, we introduced electric cycles for the commuter segment, basically to make life a lot easier for this guy who's using a cycle, carrying his family, carrying his load and everything else on it. So this was a black roadster bicycle. The fancy mountain bicycles hadn't really taken off in a meaningful way at that point of time.
Mhm.
That quite didn't work as we had expected it to. This thing, it didn't work well. We also possibly didn't market it too well. The pricing was good, though. It was at about 15,000, so perfectly bridged the gap. But in terms of technology, was still nascent at that point, and you had a lead acid battery sitting at the back of your cycle. So center of gravity is high, plus the space gets taken
Yeah.
up. So there were factors
Mhm.
which were there. 2004, and I kept on looking at this space because I was hell bent that this is something which is going to come in a very, very large way in times to come.
Mhm.
Just didn't know when. So in 2004, again, I went back to the drawing board and then we looked at a different format. So we looked at a moped where we took out the fuel
Mhm.
tank, plugged in batteries, took out the engine, and actually put in a motor there and said, now this vehicle work? And I was looking at lithium-ion batteries at that point of time. So I was looking at those batteries, extremely expensive. They were like $1,700 or $1,800 a kilowatt hour, and
Mhm.
that also didn't really work in that manner because the product became so expensive, or if you wanted to give it that range and speed and all that stuff. So you were no
Mhm.
longer bridging a gap in between, you were becoming extremely exorbitant. Didn't work, went back to the drawing board. 2007 again relaunched, but this time around relaunched as scooters, not as mopeds.
Mhm.
Now what happened here is that I realized one of the mistakes that I'd been making. One, of course, was that maybe it was too early in the day when I was pushing this, but also a consumer journey, or from an aspiration standpoint, is not cycle, electric cycle, scooter, motorcycle, car. It's actually cycle, scooter, motorcycle, car, and then an electric cycle comes in. That's a much more mature product. So I had been making a
Okay.
classic mistake of not understanding his requirements at that point of time, or not understanding his perceived requirements at that point of time. Then that's where the electric vehicle industry began to take off in 2008 when we 7 8 when we set it up. In 2008, we also established SMEV, the Society for Manufacturers of Electric Vehicles, which is the still the only EV focused body in India to talking on policy, etc. I was made the president of that at that point of time of that organization. I still continue to hold that post. Now,
Mhm.
so it's been a very interesting journey, and from then on, we've been pushing this electric mobility through since the last 13, 14 years, in the hope that at some point of time, or in the conviction actually, not hope, but in the conviction that at some point of time this industry will explode. And we are seeing that right now. I mean, maybe I got onto this bandwagon a little bit too early, but nevertheless there's enough experience behind us now which tells us what to do and what not to do.
Okay, wonderful. That's big and rich experiences, starting with the initial days with lead acid batteries and moving on to lithium ion. So, pretty good research also have gone behind what is happening right now in the field. That's wonderful. please walk us through the company Hero Electric, and would like to know about its origin and evolution. Thinking from the EV standpoint, right? There are a lot of startups in the overall ecosystem which need support, and it's all hand holding together and coming up in order to make the ecosystem function. So, if you can talk a little bit on that aspect.
So, Ashok, when I started off Hero Electric, this is way back in 2007. At that
Mhm.
point, this was an offshoot or a subset of a bicycle company. Now, I was very clear at that point that this is going to involve a lot of attention and focus. This is going to require 200% focus, not even 100% focus. So,
Mhm.
from that standpoint, it cannot be a subset of a larger company because that it'll get diluted. The whole focus will get diluted within the whole process.
True.
And I need to
True.
focus on this as well, and I need to build a team accordingly. So I started putting together the team at that point of time, and this team came from the automotive sector. But first, they had to unlearn what they had learned in the automotive sector, and then relearn the electric what we wanted to talk about. So I got a separate office, formed a separate company, got a completely separate team. So we could focus on this. The whole idea was we have a separate supply chain. All the vendors have to be completely different. They could be common, but they have to focus very differently for us. The, the way that we sell has got to be completely different. So we started focusing on a completely different vertical altogether. The dealers have to be completely focused on this sector, so they cannot be doing something else, and this is a side business for them. So that is how we
Mhm.
began. That is one of the fundamental points that I had. And so we went off into the international markets also at that point of time in 2011-12. And that again at
Mhm.
the international level was also very early. Then post that, what actually happened is the market was expanding. We were talking to the government from SMEV. We were talking from a company standpoint on the policies that should be there, etc. Then in 2012-13, there was a complete crisis that happened, a financial crisis. So we had a recession at that point of time in India, which hit us. Now, what happened
Mhm.
with that recession is that the competition which had started to create that dealer network and to create that visibility and the noise, etc., they started shutting down. So we
Okay.
started, and some of these were large, serious companies also. But nevertheless, it wasn't in their strategy to continue or whatever be the case. And we started talking to them that, please don't shut down because this is temporary. What is happening is not going to be a long-term phenomenon. This is a short-term phenomenon, and we will get out of it. But they didn't listen. They started shutting down. The problem that happens thereafter is that in the neighborhood, when you've got 5 dealerships or 6 dealerships or 7 dealerships of multiple companies, and you see one after another, they're shutting down, the
Mhm.
consumers start to get a bit jittery who've bought the vehicles
Okay.
from the not just those companies, but even from us. Because, when are you going to shut down? Kind of is the kind of question. We were
Okay.
very clear that there is no question of us pulling out of this market or shutting down. In fact, we're only going to expand right now. Right now, when the chips are down and everything is down, we are going to change our strategy. We are going to expand further into the market. So what we started doing, and we were always looking at, and that's we continue doing that right now, and I'll just tell you how, is that looking at the market as a whole. So if the market survives, if the market becomes larger, you've got a very important role to play in that market. The company independently, you can pull the market, but the market itself has to be, the industry's got to be big enough, has to be meaningful enough. So what we
Mhm.
started doing actually is we started supporting our dealers in supporting competition spare parts, for example.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
the reason for that was just to keep the industry alive, that the industry doesn't collapse. Because people, one who bought a vehicle, even from another company, will say the electric vehicle industry is not good. He's not going to talk about his particular brand, or he may or may not. But the industry
True.
takes a
True.
beating in the process. So there was a two-pronged approach that we had. One was that you keep the industry afloat, and second is the volumes had dropped so much that we already had
Mhm.
about 80, 100 dealers in place. Now, how do the dealers survive? So we wanted to give them additional revenue. So we supplied competition spare parts. These dealers started fixing the vehicles that were there in the market, even competition vehicles, and that gave
Mhm.
them a boost. It gave the market a boost, and again we began to pick back up again. Then in 2012-13 was also the MMP policy which was announced by the government at that point, which was called the National Electric Mobility Mission. So that
Okay.
again gave a boost, and that came out as the FAME 1 policy in 2015. And that FAME 1 policy translated into FAME 2 in 2019, and that's what's continuing at this point of time. So along the way, we've seen a lot of tailwinds with us. There's been a lot of push. Government has been giving this push, and there are various reasons why that is much required. Whether you look at it from an environment standpoint, 12 of the 15 most polluted cities in the world are in India. Five of them are
Mhm.
actually the NCR region. Or
Mhm.
you look at it from oil dependency, you look at it from any of these factors, even the cost of the vehicles itself and the cost of oil, etc. When you look at it from these factors, we have to move to cleaner emission vehicles. And right now, the best
True.
answer for that is electric. Going forward
Yeah.
20, 30, 40 years now, and then hence, whether it's hydrogen fuel cell or something else, that's a different story. But right
Yeah.
now, our best
Electric.
bet is electric. And that is what we have to, because it's zero emission. There is no emissions
Yeah.
there. In terms of economics, it works out right now. Infrastructure creation is important, but it's not the paramount, it's not the only driving factor. There is parity in performance and price now, at least from a two-wheeler standpoint. So we've been pushing this. Now also what we're doing is, while we've got our vehicles which have portable batteries, so which means even if you're in a block of apartments, no matter what part of the country you are in, the way you charge your mobile phone or your computer, you can take your battery up to your apartment, plug it into the wall, charge it overnight, plug it back into the vehicle in the morning, and off you go.
Mhm.
That gives you enough range for
True.
that day, which is about 70, 80 kilometers. And we've got variable options where it can go up to 210 kilometers also, depending if you're a heavy user. But the
Okay.
average use in India is only about 20 kilometers in a day maximum. It's not more than that for a
Okay.
two wheeler
With the city limit, right? Yeah.
within a city, within any of these large
Yeah.
urban cities, whether you look at Bangalore or Delhi or Hyderabad or Chennai or wherever be the case. So generally, it's
True.
not more
True.
than about 20 kilometers a day average. So from that
Nice. Yeah.
perspective, it works brilliantly, the vehicles, because you're not distracted. You're not going to a third location. You're not going to a petrol pump. You're not going to any other location to actually fill up on your fuel, etc. You charge your battery at home. You go to your workplace. Should you need to charge there, you charge your battery there also.
Yeah, absolutely. Electric is the current solution that we have with zero emission in the focus. Nice. Moving on with the details. Hero Electric has now crossed 50K units in sales. Congrats on that. And what you feel is the reason for the milestone? If you can elaborate on the instances of a particular challenges that you faced and how you overcame that situation.
So last year, which was actually from an economic standpoint, one of the worst years in India in terms of the hit that we took because of COVID and because of so many other problems, for us, it was the
Hmm.
best year in the history of the company. Now, what happened is the previous year, we grew about 15 to 16% over the previous year. Now, there's multiple ways to look at this whole scenario. So when we began with the lockdowns last year in late March, the whole idea was that at that point everything's going to shut down, and none of us knew how long these lockdowns are going to continue, when we are going to get out of it, and what is really going to happen thereafter. Now, there was a lot of negativity which was there in the market as well. There was a lot of people talking about, that the businesses are going to be wiped out and there's going to be disruption that happens and destruction, etc. So we said, look, if that happens, it happens. We can't control that.
Hmm.
But till such time as that doesn't happen, we have to stay positive. So
True.
what we started doing is, right from the very, very early days, which is 5th April actually, we came out with the first promotion, which was to do with that if you order the vehicle right now at a in a non-refundable basis, we will deliver the vehicle to you when the lockdowns open up to at your home place. So what
Hmm.
happened is that, and we started looking at training our dealers in how to handle. So earlier, before that, we'd been struggling with a online versus offline model. So what really works? Should it be an online model where we actually continue to push through the e-commerce websites and through our websites, etc.? And then what happens to
Okay.
the dealership? So there was always that kind of clash which was there. There was a resistance which was there, even though we had
Hmm.
been very careful to say that we will route the business through the dealers, even if it's an online
Hmm.
sale, because we want the dealer interest to be there for service and save, etc. later on.
Hmm.
So now what we started doing, now since we had a lockdown situation, everybody's available on the computers and phones, etc. So we started training up the dealers first and foremost. And we started
Okay.
training up our own employees also on how to handle life after we open up. What is going to happen? So a
Okay.
lot of positivity messages were going out. We did about 2,500 rounds of sessions with our employees at that point of time. So these were
Oh,
different.
that's
So there was
huge.
a lot of hobbies. There was a lot of the singing clubs and antakshari clubs, and then there was yoga and everything. So all of these modules that we put together. Then we
Okay.
did a number of these sessions with the dealers on explaining the benefits and how to handle social media, how to handle digital marketing, etc. So when we came out with our first promotion, which I was telling you about, so we had some bookings, but a lot of inquiries. And now we wanted to understand from these customers that you've gone to the website, you've registered yourself, but you haven't really booked the vehicle. What is holding you back? So we
Hmm.
started doing the first of the kind automotive webinars with our customers or potential customers. These guys are not bought
Okay.
your vehicle yet, but they are looking to buy a vehicle. And so we wanted to understand what is it that they're looking for? What is holding them back? One of the points that came out amongst numerous ones, one of them was, about financing, which we are working on. Another one was that we've never tried out an electric vehicle. We know about it, we've heard about it, but we've not tried it out. So if you haven't tried out, how
Hmm.
can we buy such an expensive vehicle?
Hmm.
Immediately, we came out with the promotion, which was a 3-day return policy. So we'll deliver the vehicle to you at home. If you don't like it, call us. We'll take the vehicle back. There's no depreciation, there's nothing of that sort happening. So we will take it back at the
Oh.
price that you bought it, and that's it,
Hmm.
without no questions asked. Sales
Okay.
began to pick up there. So we started doing number of these webinars with the customers. Sales began to pick up. So much so that in terms of our volume from online platforms, because there was there was a shutdown in the physical walk-ins, etc., weren't happening. But from the online platform, we were able to generate 10x the growth over the previous year. And when the
Okay.
markets began to open up, since we'd already been training our dealers, we'd been appointing our preferred garage owners, we've been talking to the customers, etc., suddenly the footfalls increased. So that
Okay.
worked in us really when things opened up. We hit the ground running. We didn't have to stop think what to do now because we were already doing that even when the lockdowns were there. So that is one very important factor where we were talking positivity. We knew that this is a short term thing. As we're doing now, we know that what is happening right now in the country, even though it's a very sorry state. It's a very unfortunate state. People are losing their lives, etc. But at the same time, we will get out of it. And once we get
True.
out of it,
Yeah.
there is going to be pent up demand. We know that people will look at not getting onto public transport. They will be scared of getting into public transport right now. And what are the
Yeah.
options that they look at? So they will look for options which are economical, which are convenient, easy to use, and they are friendly on their pocket. So it's not a very exorbitant purchase. That is what we believe, and that is where I believe that this year is going to be a far more powerful year for us than what it was last year. So we are going to be doubling this year as against last year for
Yeah.
these factors, and we are gearing up for
Nice.
that. The plant is gearing up. We are talking to the dealers. We are training them. We are training our preferred garage owners. We are talking directly to customers also in a lot of ways. Our digital marketing is going on full swing. So every which way when we look at it, this year is going to be a very important year for us.
Wonderful. I guess it's growing with strong strategy in place, and also the number of dealers are also continuously growing as I read the articles.
Yes.
Wonderful. Moving on with the favorite of the products that you have, electric bikes were once in theory, and now we are realizing the idea is coming true, and it's on our Indian roads too. About all the products that you have, like Photon and Optima, which one is your favorite and why?
That's like asking a parent, which is who's your favorite child? It's a bit of a
Little bit
difficult
tricky.
question because all of these vehicles, we've introduced over a period of time.
Hmm.
So I mean, these two brands that you've spoken about, so all of them fill a different niche in the market. All of them fill a different gap in the market. For example, Flash, which is for an entry level person, so it's a really low price point. It's an economical product. Nix is
Hmm.
targeted at the B2B segment, so it's designed in a way that you can keep your basket at the back and you can have a range going upwards to 210 kilometers. Optima
Hmm.
is the best selling family vehicle in the country for the past many years, and we are now on the fourth version of the vehicle. So Optima is our biggest seller in terms of the models, and then Photon is in the premium end in the city speed, higher end in the city speed. Now, the way we define this is that each vehicle performs a different role. Each vehicle is defined for a different role. So we have 6 platforms, and then on top of that, we have 13 different models. So we've got variations ranging from a low speed to a city speed. A low speed is a vehicle, or a comfort speed, as we call it, is a vehicle which requires no license registration, runs below 25 kilometers an hour. And anything over that is actually a high speed vehicle as per government definitions. But we have coined a term of city speed in between, where we have a very strong role to play. Now, these are vehicles which have a range and a speed of about 45 kilometer speed and about 80, 85-kilometer range, and that could vary. So, and then we've got a high speed category which is at 60, 70 kilometers an hour, which where we don't really have a very strong presence at this point of time. That is something that where we will graduate to, but not right now, because we believe a person, when you look at the total pyramid, when you look at the IC engine current pyramid and the customer base that you're targeting from there, 85% of that customer base is actually entry level or commuter segment and buying vehicles at about 70, 75, 80,000 rupees, not beyond 90,000 rupees. Beyond
Okay.
90,000 is more of a lifestyle category. That's
Right. Super
gets
bikes
into the
and
premium.
yeah.
Yeah, that gets
Yeah.
into the premium category. So what we believe is that that 85% of the market is a very, very large segment. And that is a
Mhm.
segment where they will buy a vehicle which is not much more expensive than what they're currently buying. So a person who's buying a vehicle for 75,000 right now is not going to buy an electric vehicle for 1,30,000 or 1,40,000 just because it's electric. The TCO may be low
True.
or lower, but nevertheless, the initial purchase price becomes very high. Plus the battery replacement cost, where it's a very powerful vehicle, your battery replacement cost after 3 years or 4 years or 5 years is very high.
Huge.
In some
Mhm.
cases, it's equivalent to buying an entry level IC engine vehicle at this point of time. So that is what is
Okay.
deterring some of these customers from getting into that kind of a category or buying vehicles from that category. Whereas when you look at from our segment, our category that we are promoting, that we are pushing forward, and that we believe is going to be the mainstay for the next for this foreseeable future, is the city
Mhm.
speed category, 45 to 50 kilometer speed vehicle, 80-kilometer range, and that is
Mhm.
at about 62, 63,000 rupee price point. So your initial
Okay.
purchase price is low, your running cost is much lower. Just to give you a perspective, if you're going
Mhm.
commuting, let's say 40 or 50 kilometers a day, which is a very high commute, but if you're commuting that kind of distance, if you've got an IC engine vehicle, you're looking at about 1 liter of fuel every day.
True. True.
That means about 90 rupees per day. And that vehicle is probably costing you about 75,000 rupees. In our case, the vehicle is costing you about 62,000 rupees. So initial purchase price is lower. Speed is also lower. I accept that.
Mhm.
But when you look at it, if you're running that 40 to 50 kilometers a day, you're looking at 1.5 units of power. That's about 12
Okay.
rupees. So when you look
Okay.
at
A
it over
huge difference
oh,
there. Yeah.
huge difference. So when you look at it over
Yeah.
3 years, if you're using every day, 1,000 days, you've got 90,000 and you've got 12,000. Your 78,000 is
Okay.
the saving that you have. And so this vehicle actually becomes more than free. You've actually taken money into your pocket rather
Yeah.
than spent it. So
True. True.
those economics the customers are beginning to understand. And those economics can only come in the category that we are talking about at this point, which is more the city speed category. The minute you go into the higher speed categories, your initial purchase price is high, about 1 lakh 20, 1 lakh 30,000, 1 lakh 40,000, and that is post subsidy. When the subsidy goes away, that's going to go even higher. The second is your running cost is not that much lower than that of IC engine vehicle, and when it comes down to battery replacement, that's going to be very expensive. So though the market will graduate in that direction because the battery prices are dropping, the performance is improving, at this point it is more the city speed category which is going to be the mainstay, and that is where the commuter segment is realizing that.
Mhm. Nice, wonderful. I guess that's a very well explained, putting the statistics in perspective and comparing how it costs with the IC engines versus EV. Thank you. Running a big company with huge responsibility on a shoulder, it's not easy without a strong team, right? So, wanted to understand how big is your team on the ground, and what's your strategy in building up the team?
That's a very important factor. See, companies are not built by on the shoulders of one person or this thing. It's built on the shoulders of a team which believes what you're doing.
True.
Now, when I started building this team together, so like I said, initially my whole idea was that it has to be a completely separate team, which is focusing 100% of their time and attention, or maybe more than 100% on electric mobility and on growing this business. Not on, there's no distractions there at all. So our team that we've got is a very, very good team. And one of the factors that I look at is the level of commitment that they have when the chips are down. So right now, for example,
Mhm.
we are going through a phase where, the atmosphere, the whole thought process, ideology, everything is low right now because of what we are seeing around us. But yet you have to stay upbeat. You have to stay positive. You have to keep pushing. And that's what my team is doing right now. So what I've done is I've got a very good run team at the higher level, and then below that also we are getting in. We've got very good teams below that who have an extensive amount of experience with us. They've learned our method. So we've got a concept called Hero Care, where somebody joins and then they are automatically inducted into Hero Care. Where as a company we take care of them. We take care of our employees. We are honest with them. In terms of a strategy, in terms of the way that we work with them. Even when we look at our dealerships, for example, so when we are making sure that the dealerships make money, so if the dealer makes money, we will ourselves make money. We cannot make money on sitting on the standing on the
True.
shoulders of the dealers, because that's a network, that's a strength that we've got. So that is one part of
Mhm.
it. Now in our team also, I the way my functioning, my style is that I I have a strong vision, which is what where we have to go in the long term, but there's no clear path on how to get there, and we have to chalk our own path. So we have sometimes we take a wrong direction. It's like you have to get to one a place A to place B, but there is no road in between. There's nobody's done that. Nobody's crossed that path. Nobody's crossed that desert or whatever, that forest, whatever you may call it, so far. So
Mhm.
you have to chalk your. You just know that you have to head in that direction, and that's what we continue doing. And sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we go off into a direction which doesn't really work. Very quickly we do course correction, come back on track, try a new way, and then go move forward. So I don't penalize my team, for example, for making mistakes. I mean
Mhm.
that's if you don't take decisions, if you don't take a this thing, you will. I mean, if you're taking a decision, you will make a mistake at times. Every decision cannot be the right one. So I don't penalize my team for that. But at the same time, I tell them that once you made a mistake, learn from it and move on. I mean, that's something which is, and take a calculated risk. So if you're taking a risk, take a calculated risk that should things not work out in the manner that you are planning right now, then what happens? What is the fallback options? So as long as you've got your fallback option in place, then we can go ahead with that kind of a decision. And we've done that. We've taken numerous such steps in the past, and we continue to do that on a regular basis. The next factor is that the team has to be completely driven from the inside. So you
Mhm.
can drive them, but you have to be very, very honest with your team. You have to, they can see through it. So they can see through lies, they can see through, facade that you may be able to put up, etc. So I'll give you an example, you know, and now people believe this as well. So earlier when we used to hire, and I used to be doing town halls with our people, and we used to have everybody in a room, and sometimes a guy would say that so I would ask them that, okay, so what does your family think about your work, where do you work, etc., because I've always believed in it. But you get somebody new from the outside, they have to it takes a while to really come into the culture. And so one guy, I
Mhm.
remember him saying that, so I've told them I work in Hero. So I said, okay, that's very good. Have you told them you work in Hero Electric? He says, no, so I haven't told them that. This is about 5 6 years back. So I said, why
Okay.
haven't you told them? So he says, they'll think, I don't know what is this business that you're doing, whether it's going to survive, not survive, what's going to happen, all of that. I said, fine, it's okay. Uh, the same guy about 2 years back, I think this is 19 or somewhere thereabouts. So I was talking in this thing, and he said, sir, I want to come and say something. So I said, yeah, please come. So he said, that this is what you asked me at that point, and this is what I said at that point of time. But now
Mhm.
my children, my relatives proudly say that my son or my father or my uncle or my cousin works in Hero Electric. So I said, what has changed? He
Wonderful.
said, they all realize the importance of what we are doing, for the
Okay.
environment standpoint, whether we look at it from any other this thing. So he says, now we are proud to say that we work in Hero Electric. So this is something where you can sow the seeds of that, but and then you have to kind of just help them flourish there, and that is what is
That's a
happening.
big
So the
thing.
team has to be very, very committed, and especially in a business like this, which is constantly we face headwinds, we face issues, we face whole load of problems on a day-to-day basis, and there's no clear cut path. There's nobody's done this before.
True. That's a big thing, actually, having the mindset of accepting what we are doing and the importance around it. Yeah. Great. Would like to know what was the first moment of relief for Hero Electric since the inception? Is it a part of any MVP that you produce or any R&D work, or is it the sales that you achieved?
See, sales is a relative number. Sales is a factor of, it's a it's something that we have to continue doing. We continue have to
True.
continue growing, because at the end of the day, when you look at it, no matter what sales that we've got right now, we are still small when it comes to the larger industry. But
Mm-hmm.
we know clearly that the path that we are on is the right one. And this path, again, we will have to continue defining as we go along. But right now, that is the absolute right path that we are on. So our strategy is right. So one of
Mm-hmm.
the ways was that when I heard that some of our competition companies, and much larger, hundreds of times larger than us, were actually using our products in their dealer conferences and comparing their product against ours to say that, look, our product is better.
Oh, wonderful.
So, different
Yeah.
category, but at the same time, so they can see that, I can see that some of the stuff that we are doing is very,
Mm-hmm.
very good. It's good enough for a company which is much larger than us to be making that comparison in terms of the products. So
Okay.
that is one part of it. The second is, a lot of people ask me that, you came in too early, you burned too much of effort and energy, you've put sweat and blood into it. Is it all worth it? Technology is a viable factor. Technology you can
Mm-hmm.
always replicate, technology you can always buy, but experience is something that you cannot. Experience has to come with time, and experience has to come with taking bad decisions and making mistakes, and then coming onto the right path. So that is what experience tells you, and this is what has happened in our case as well. So we have learned so many things along the way. We earlier began the path many years back. I'm talking about 10 years back, of talking about technology as being the driving factor. So it was all about technology. Our advertising was all about technology. To cater to that, first, the early adopters, the technology geeks, as we call them, so they are going to be
Mm-hmm.
the customers. Then we
Mm-hmm.
realized that that's not the right way. That's not the thing. Then we went off into a totally different this thing. And this is, I'm talking about 8, 9 years back. Started talking about responsibility behavior towards the
Okay.
environment, towards my own social network, about everything, about my family and everything. And that also didn't work. That path didn't work. Then we went into a different strategy. Then we went into a different strategy. We are now in a very different strategy, which is working now. So we've learned this the hard way, that what is working, what is not working, and then take course
Mm-hmm.
correction. So we are probably, in terms of the overall strategy on how we are approaching the market, we are in probably version 6 or 7 since our inception, because that's a
Mm-hmm.
change that we continuously keep on doing. And what we're doing
True.
right now versus what we're going to be coming out with next year is very different. So there's going to be course correction that happens even next year. So that's why I keep
True.
on
True.
saying, that the path that we are on right now is the
Mm-hmm.
right one for us. But
Okay.
a year later, whether that's still going to be valid, no, we'll have to make
Mm.
some changes there. We'll have to tweak something there.
Yeah, of course, changes are always coming on the way. So, especially on that part, you have been into two-wheeler industry for quite long since the inception, and even when EV bikes started, you were there behind the research and all these things. What's your vision of India in EV bike space in 5 years, and what changes you dream to see?
When we look at the market, we are very realistic when it comes to the numbers that we talk about, etc. But deep
Mhm.
down, I know that the numbers are going to be larger than that, because I can see the changes happening. I can foresee that the
Mhm.
numbers that I'm talking about publicly are kind
Okay.
of, those are realistic right now, but the numbers actually that is going to happen is probably going to be larger than that, and we are gearing up for that. That is what we are preparing for, a much larger number than what we talk about. What I
Okay.
anticipate happening is there is going to be a shift, that you're going to see a sea change that you're going to see right now. There's strong competition coming in, that's for sure. And competition is always good. Competition is always welcome, because that creates the whole buzz in the market, that creates a noise in the market. And that is where
Mhm.
the market realizes the importance, and that there is a conversion happening. And serious competition is always good competition. That grows the market substantially. So what I anticipate is, in the next 5 years, let's say 2026 here, at a bare minimum level, this market is going to be about 20 to 25% of the current IC engine market. That number
Mhm.
could go up to about 40% also. There are numerous
Okay.
projections which talk about 40%, but for that 40%, certain triggers have to happen. And some of them are
Mhm.
monetary triggers, some of them are non-monetary triggers. I spoke earlier about, something like, for example, why should this electric mobility, in order to create awareness, because we are doing what we can at a company level and what we this thing, but at a national level, it's a need of the hour. For example, why cannot it be a part of the Swachh Bharat program, Abhiman program, where we are talking about, when we talk about pollution on the roads, etc., or outside, we have to talk about air as well, because that is affecting us hugely. So that will create
True.
awareness that this is a clean vehicle, clean mobility, and start switching there. Mandating vehicles, whether it's B2B or city centers, which are highly congested and highly polluted, to start converting to electric, you have to have certain goals in place. So while we have certain projections. Those projections are basis that there is no fixed goal that the government has set up. There is no
Okay.
fixed deadline that the government has set up. So, and there is going to be progression which we move ahead. Should that change? Should the government say, okay, fine, 2027 or 2028, 100% electrification, at least in the two-wheeler segment, then we know that that's where you got to hit. And then accordingly, the
Mhm.
market will convert much faster. But in the absence of that, bare minimum, you're going to be talking about 40 to 50 lakh vehicles on the road in the next 5 years. And that is going to be a jump from about 1.5 lakh right now. So that is a huge
Yeah.
jump that you're looking at in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
There's going to be a huge jump. And this is going to happen. This is inevitable.
Okay. We are talking 10x and 20x now.
We're talking 10x and 20x, even more than that.
Wonderful. I see from the other interviews that you are a passionate photographer too. So I was just curious, how do you manage the time and spend time for your passion along with this journey, having all these achievements in Hero Electric, and taking along your passion also always with you?
I think it's extremely important to have a distraction and a hobby and a passion, especially
Mhm.
if you're in a high stress job. The way that, I mean, the kind of work that I have, it is a high stress job from that perspective. And I need a distraction. Everybody does. And this is a very, very important part of the whole journey. Now, in my case, I was lucky enough to find it and be able to pursue it, photography. And also because I used to travel so extensively till before COVID hit us. So I was traveling extensively and I used to always travel with my camera. There was never a time when I
Okay.
didn't have my camera with me.
Mhm.
For me, that is a kind of meditation in terms of that is the time when I'm able to de-stress, when I'm able to shut out everything else and come back and focus on that particular moment. So whenever I find that there's too much of stress on me, or I'm bogged down, and it's happening right now. We've got so many issues happening. We've got so many people who are going through a lot of challenges and problems right now with them, with their families, etc. And there is limited amount that we can do, because you're pushing, but there are there are times when you're just not able to do enough, and it becomes extremely stressful, not from a work standpoint, but even otherwise. I'm in humanitarian grounds because I'm in that field, the way I feel I'm responsible for the people who work with me in my company, their families. So it's a very large family from that perspective, our dealer network and everybody else. These are people that these are people that you are in touch with and who are giving up their time and energy and effort and everything for you. So you owe it to
Mhm.
them, on humanitarian grounds and any other aspect that you look at it. So what happens at a lot of times is when I'm completely bogged down, I'm drained out, I come and start processing my pictures. And that takes me into a different world altogether. It takes me into that moment when I was taking that picture and what I was thinking or what I was not thinking of that. So
Okay.
I've got tens of lakhs of pictures which I've not even processed. I've got a huge archive with me. A lot of
Mhm.
them I haven't even processed so far. And that's the time when I really sit down and start processing. I'll spend half an hour there. I'll have my music playing, and I completely get out of that, and then come back with a new strategy, with a new thought process, and a new push. That is what I'm doing post that event. But when I'm
Mhm.
traveling, and I was having this, I've made some very, very dear friends because of this hobby that I have, which is of photography. And when I'm traveling, I'm always traveling with the camera, and that's always strung across me. So I've gone for meetings with the camera slung across me. Sometimes
Okay.
it becomes a great icebreaker when I go into a serious meeting. So I went into a serious meeting with the bankers, and I had a camera strung across me, and they came in and they said, "Hang on, we didn't know we had a photo shoot." I said, "You do now." And one of them then decided to go outside with me for me to take his pictures and then send them back. So I've got so many
Okay.
stories from that perspective, from that point. And that is something that it takes me into a different world at that point of time, and then that enables me to rejuvenate and then come back into this world and start pushing again with new vigor.
Wonderful. Yeah, I guess we all need the distraction to rejuvenate ourselves. A good one. Moving on with this multitasking, and you manage to carry along the passion and all these things, right? How do you manage and balance your personal time along with the work?
See, right now it's actually pretty good because we are working from home. So here, I'm not spending that time commuting anywhere else. The Zoom calls are working. There is that Zoom stress which is there, or there is that digital this thing. But nevertheless, there is so much more we are able to achieve. I mean, if you think about it in a way, had it been prior to this whole thing happening, and you sitting in Bangalore and I sitting in Delhi, we would have had to coordinate a time where either I was traveling to Bangalore or you were traveling to Delhi, and
True.
then do this interview. Or you may not even have been able to do it in that manner. But now suddenly you're doing these webinars, and you're talking to hundreds of people in one go, where you could not talk to them, or you're listening to people from the best universities in the world and the best organizations and corporations in the world, which you would have not had access to earlier. So from that
Yeah,
perspective,
absolutely.
you're able to manage your time and all that much better. The downside is that there is this Zoom stress. You're sitting in front of a screen all the time and just staring, and it is stressful from that perspective. So my calendar. I'm pretty good with my calendar. So I set myself, my uh, times, and my calendar's full up for the next number of days. So I just keep on everything that I have to do. I put it in my calendar. And my alarm
Mhm.
goes off that 5 minutes or 10 minutes prior, so I know this is something that is coming up, and I start getting up for it. So
Okay.
I consciously make time out where I'm able to de-stress or just step back a little bit on a day-to-day basis, even if it means that in the evening I just go out and start walking for half an hour. And I do that while working, and then I come back and start working again. So that is a way
Mhm.
where I'm just able to process what I've been doing that day, and then come back to my work.
Okay, wonderful. Moving on to the next segment of this episode, the final segment, which is a rapid fire round. Jotted down some questions. Let me go over it. What's your favorite sports or game you play?
Scuba diving.
Oh, wonderful. Nice. So
So
you did
that's
it
something.
recently?
It's been a number
Okay.
of years actually, but I do want to get back to
Okay.
it. That's something that I would really love to pursue.
Okay, nice. What's the best thing that happened to you this month?
This month, okay, so last month, so I started actually teaching as a this thing. So I was teaching at a university here in Gurgaon called Masters Union, and the course
Okay.
is called on the future of mobility. And so I was
Wow.
you're talking at a conference versus teaching master students, post-grad students, is a very different ball
Hmm.
game, because when you're talking in a
Hmm.
conference, it's kind of a one-way flow. You're saying whatever, etc. There are some questions that come to you, but when you're teaching somebody as a course, and this
Hmm.
is actually something where they're going to get credits for, it's a very, very different
Hmm.
ball game. So I was very
Yeah.
nervous. So I had my first session with them, with the students, and it was supposed to be an elective, but then eventually everybody took that course. So everybody, all the students are participating in that. And physically, I took one session, and the feedback that I
Hmm.
got from there was a very, very good feedback, that this was one of the best sessions that we've had. It just so happened
Oh.
that the next day the university had to go into a lockdown, and because they had some cases, etc. But
Hmm.
the feedback that I got from there was probably the most uh, positive, and the most, upbeat feedback that I got.
Oh, wonderful. And getting from teaching line is a big thing. Nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What is the book that you have recently read, and what's your favorite?
So recently, I was reading this book, which is called. Let me just show you. It's called Clean Disruption by Tony Seba, and
Okay.
this is I've just finished that earlier. So
Hmm.
this was about again disruption, what's happening. And Tony Seba is a great advocate of electric vehicles, and he was with GM and everything earlier. So that is a great book.
Yeah.
When I go for my walks, so I've actually been listening to Audible, so listening to books rather than reading them. And I used to love reading earlier, but just I haven't got back into reading mode yet. But I'm listening to them, and right now I'm listening to the Bhagavad Gita by Devdutt Patnaik, and enjoying it,
Okay.
because that's a very modern version interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita, and it's not so much as the religion part of it, but I'm enjoying the spirituality and the work part of it, relating it to businesses and relating it to work and today modern life. So I'm enjoying that.
Wonderful. Nice. And if you wanted to recommend one book for any budding entrepreneurs, what would that be?
There's too many actually. There's too many books. So there is. I've got my book collection here. Let me see which one I can collect. So there is. Uh, there's one which is called Eating the Big Fish. This is
Okay.
talking about you coming in as a smaller this thing and how do you compete against the big sharks and the big fish which is out there. So this is something that I thoroughly enjoyed. There's a lot of books that I also enjoy. Let me see. So there's a lot of other books that I enjoy which have more to do with overall spirituality or uh, just development, personal development.
Mhm. Okay, nice. And what is your favorite subject in school?
Now, if I were to go back to school, I would probably look at something like, where I've always been good and I've always enjoyed building things on my with my hands. So I would
Mhm.
love to get into an engineering space where I'm actually building something with it,
Okay,
maybe a vehicle or maybe a solar powered vehicle or something on those lines.
the applied aspects of engineering. Okay,
Applied aspects of, even though I've never done engineering, but that's something that I think
okay,
I could do.
okay, wonderful. What does creativity means to you in one sentence?
Creativity is when you're looking at things in a different perspective and be able to interpret what they were meant to you, and be able to project that in your own manner.
Nice. How are your sleeping habits, and what's the first thing that you do in the morning to boost yourself?
So I I've begun to sleep actually fairly early. So I'm normally in bed by about 10:15 or so. I would watch or
Okay.
read something for about, and by 10:45 or so, I'm generally sleeping. And I wake up by about 6 o'clock and I go out for a walk. And so these days, I'm seeing a lot of peacocks outside. So I go out
Oh,
and see the
wow.
peacocks, and I see the peacocks, making all those dances and making all those noises and all. And that's
Nice.
something that I do for about half an hour or so, and that's what really
Nice.
kickstarts my system. So that's something I really enjoy.
That's a beautiful way to start. Seeing the peacocks also.
Absolutely.
Nice. Yeah. What's the best compliment you have ever received so far?
Okay, so there was this time. This is about probably 2000, early 2018 or 2019. I was speaking at a conference here in Delhi, and once I
Okay.
finished the conference, I came out. When you step down and and there are people who are wanting to meet you and everything, and you're exchanging cards. So there's this gentleman standing there, smiling at me at that point. And so I met him after that. And that time, masks were not the norm, and you could shake hands and everything at that point of time. So I shook his hand,
Mhm.
and he says, "Mr. Munjal, you remember me?" I said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't." So he says, "I met you in so and so conference in 2000, I don't know, what, 10 or 11 or 12 or something like that. And I told you you were the
Mhm.
biggest fool." And so there's about 10, 12 people standing around. And I said, I
Oh my
was a
God.
bit taken back. I said, okay, you are right. You have a right to your opinion. So I said, what do you say now? And I started laughing. So I started kind of making it into a joke because, what do you say
Okay.
to something like that? So he says, you're the biggest visionary. So I said,
Okay.
there's a very fine line between a fool and a visionary. And then it became a big joke. I didn't take that person's card. So I don't know who that gentleman is. But I'll
Okay.
always remember that because, in a public gathering to hear something like that
Yeah.
was good, was validation.
Yeah. It was sound and a big acknowledgement at the end.
Absolutely.
Nice. Yeah. Um, you must be mentoring multiple people in the organization. So, who is your mentor, and what is your formula of reaching to your mentors when you need them?
So I do mentor a number of people, and it's not just within the organizations. It's even students. It's even smaller startup businesses. There's been a number of them. Last couple of months, I have not had time to really interact with them in that manner, but I have been doing that because what I believe is, sharing everything, and I share everything with them. I tell them, even when I'm mentoring these people, I get them to sit with my HODs and for the HODs to pass on information to them, because at the end of the day, you're growing this whole ecosystem, you're growing this whole industry, and it's not that somebody's going to come and take away your business or anything of that sort. They will grow in their own manner, and if this can help them, so be it. So I don't have any single mentor as such, but I look at different people, different organizations at different times. I've always looked at
Mhm.
Steve Jobs, and I don't know whether you can see that there's a book of Steve Jobs just lying behind me, for a
Yeah.
simple reason that he had a very one-minded focus on design and functionality, made things easy, the product fancier, sexier, easier to understand, and very very easy approach to the products. And even when I had started, this is way back in, I think it was probably 90s, when I got my first computer, Commodore 64 at that point of time, and then when I got the Newton, which was the Apple. And since then, I've been a
Okay.
great fan of his. There was another
Okay.
product and a company which I used to be a great fan of. Unfortunately, they died out, which was the Palm Pilot, which was the Palm. And I used to use the Palm because
Mhm.
I've always been very organized. So I've got a number of people who Elon Musk for that matter, Warren Buffett for that matter, where I follow them. But would I say that there is one mentor? No, I don't think so. I think I look at different people at different times of and different stages of my life.
Great. Yeah, taking the principles what they followed. Wonderful.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. I thoroughly enjoyed the interview that we have done so far, and catching up with all your brain and the insights that you rightly pointed out with so many informations here. Thank you very much, Munjal, for your time. It's pleasure and wonderful talking to you.
Thank you, Ashok. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're at the end of episode number 24. Thank you very much, Naveen, for coming on and sharing your experiences. And to our listeners, you can find out the episode summary in the description. Until we catch up soon with more exciting stories, stay tuned, be motivated. Thank you.